welcome to the second knowledge share for the Data Future specification. My name is Matt Earle. I'm the trainer at HESA. I'm going to manage the webinar with regards to opening up your microphones and giving you access to questions. And you're going to be presented to by Rachel Wilkes and Ruth Underwood. And I'm sure they will introduce themselves.
My name is Ruth Underwood. I work in the liaison team at HESA. The plan for today, I'm going to give you an overview of how curriculum data is structured in the Data Futures model and the data items that are collected for curriculum. So we'll go into a bit more detail than we did at the overview of the whole model last week. And then Rachel is going to take you through a number of scenarios for how different provision would be returned. So first off then, structure within the model. There are a number of entities in the model that collect curriculum data. We have the course entity. As I said, I'll go through the detail of the data items in each of these in a moment. This is to show how it all fits together. So we've got a course entity. Providers return details of each of their courses to us. Each course will have one associated qualification. So that's the qualification students are aiming for as part of that course with its associated information. We also have this new concept of the session year, which records the planned dates for each year of a course. And those two sections, the course and the qualification and the session year, linked together by the student course session. So that's the student level data that records a year of the student's activity. So for each year that a student engaged with this course, they would have one student course session to show them engaging with that course. The final part of curriculum data, if we just take out the sub-entities of course and qualification, there is module data. So we also have a module entity in the model that's separate to the course, because we know that there's not a that modules can be common across multiple courses, so course and module are separate, and as part of the student course session entity that records the year of students' activity, it also records which modules they're engaging with via the module instance. So you've got these four sections of curriculum data: course, qualification, module, and session year. And they link in to what the student's doing via the student course session and the module instance. So that's the high level structure within the model. What I will go through then is the different data items that we collect against each of those entities. So starting off with qualification, there's just three fields on the qualification entity. We have the qualification identifier. This is a unique identifier defined by the reporting provider. They have to submit for each qualification. We also get a qualification title, and then the qualification category field. So this is the bit that tells us what the actual qualification is. So is it a first degree, is it an HND, etc. So it's closest equivalent in current student return is the course aim field. However, what we've done with this coding frame is take out some valid entries that sat within course aim, where course aim was collecting a couple of different concepts rather than purely being the qualification aim itself. So what I'll do is I'll go through a few of those, and then as we're going through the rest of the curriculum data, I can show you where those concepts have moved to. So firstly, in the qualification category field, we don't have valid entries that have this leading towards registration with the Architects Registration Board. So rather than having, for example, one valid entry for a first degree that leads to registration with the Architects Registration Board and another for a first degree that doesn't, you've just got one valid entry for first degree, and this is collected elsewhere. Same is true of qualifications that lead to eligibility to register with a health or social care or veterinary body. Again, that's been taken out of this field. And finally, within the course aim field currently, it has a few valid entries that say something along the lines of a qualification at level H or M is a prerequisite for course entry. So again, that's not purely saying what the qualification is, it's talking about what the prerequisites are for entry to that course. So we've taken that concept out of the qualification category field. So qualification category is essentially course aim. but with a few differences where we've stripped a few valid entries out of there. So it's just those three fields on the qualification entity: qual ID, qual title, and qual category. There are a couple of sub-entities for a bit more information about that qualification. So first off, we have the awarding body role. Here we're recording who is the awarding body or bodies for a qualification. So providers will, in a lot of cases, be submitting a UK PRN. It might be their own UK PRN or of another provider if they've got that arrangement. But that's where we get the awarding body. And then the qualification subject. So we're recording the HECOS codes that are associated with that qualification with the relevant proportions. So you know the breakdown where there's more than one subject. This is also where we record the teacher training specialism for relevant qualifications. So for those teacher training qualifications, at least one subject will be flagged as being the teacher training specialism.
Ruth, can I just interrupt you there? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
There's a question here. I have a question. Why does a course only have one qualification? Surely courses can lead to multiple qualifications.
Yeah, we know in some cases, and we've had examples from providers where they can have multiple qualifications. The guidance is that they should return the qualification that's the highest level if there's more than one. So it should be the highest qualification that's the aim of that course.
Thank you.
Okay. So that is the data that we collect about qualifications. We want to know what the qualification is, who's awarding it, what are the subjects. So if we briefly look back at how that fits into the model, I've said already that it links to a course. It could link to many courses if they have the same aim. But the qualification within the model also links back to the qualification awarded entity. So when a student is awarded a qualification, they have a qualification awarded returned, which links to that qualification that they're achieving. What that means is providers have to return one qualification entity for each qualification that that students can aim for or achieve. So it's possible you could have qualifications that are returned because students are gaining them, but not associated with any courses. For example, if a qualification is only offered as an exit award if a student leaves a course early, they would still have to return a qualification for that. So that is qualifications. I will move on to courses next. I've split the data items here between ones that are currently collected on the course entity, and then I'll run through some of the new ones, kind of focus in on those. So for those of you familiar with the current return, these should look fairly familiar. We have a course ID. Again, that's the unique identifier defined by the reporting provider. We need to know if the course is a teacher training course. That's the teacher training identifier. And if it is in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, we also record if it allows students to teach bilingually. We have the closed course field that records if the course is open to any suitably qualified candidate or whether it's closed to a smaller group. And then finally, the course title. So all of those also on the course entity in our current student return. Like I said, we've got a few new ones that I will run through. We have our fully flexible indicator. So this is returned for any fully flexible courses to indicate that that is the type of course that it is. I'll put the definition up, but I'm not expecting you to read all of this. Essentially, this is courses where the students have a high degree of flexibility over their intensity of study. They might study discontinuously, and when they sign up to a given module, they may have an extended period of time to complete that and can study at their own pace rather than during fixed periods. We've got this new field added in for a couple of reasons. Firstly, there are some other fields within the model that simply don't apply to a fully flexible course, so you might not be able to return an expected end date or a year of program, for example, because the flexibility is too high to make those useful variables for that course. And it also could be useful as well when it comes to looking at the data and validating it, we might expect that fully flexible courses have more variable FTEs or more breaks in learning because the students have that option. So that's the first new field. We then have funding level. Now, funding level is a field in the current student return, but it's collecting two different concepts. It collects some information about the level of the course, but also about the length of each year of the course. So what we've done is split that out into two different fields. And the first one is recording the level. And so that is at the course level within the model. So these are the valid entries that are within that field. So it is quite broad levels that we're interested in here. And I mentioned earlier that we've one of the concepts that we've taken out of the qualification category field is that idea of whether a certain qualification is a prerequisite for course entry. And that's because that is replaced by this field. So we know, for example, from valid entry 2, taught course which qualification at level 6 or above is normally required. That's the equivalent of the course saying valid entries at the moment that say that a qualification at level H is a prerequisite for course entry. A couple more then of the new fields. Qualification identifier. That is, as I've said, a course must link back to a qualification that is the aim of that course. So the unique identifier for the qualification must be returned on the course. And finally, the sandwich field. So this sits on the course entity, as I've said, and it records whether or not that course has the option of a sandwich element, so sandwich placement, and whether that is a thick or thin sandwich. It doesn't necessarily mean that every student on that course will complete a placement. It's saying that there's the option of that placement, and it's at the student level where it would be recorded which students did and did not complete that placement. So this just says this course has the option of a sandwich placement. So those are all the fields that sit on the course entity itself. As with qualification, I'll do a bit of a run through of the sub-entities. We have the course initiative entity. This records different initiatives associated with the course in a similar way to the initiative fields in the current student return. So there'll be particular schemes that we're interested in monitoring. And it's recorded here where it's relevant at the course level. So we also have an initiative entity associated with the student level. If an initiative is recorded in this entity, it's saying that every student on that course, that initiative is relevant to each one of those students. So one example is a higher apprenticeship. If you record the course initiative here, every student on that course is doing a higher apprenticeship. We do have valid from and to dates associated with the initiative. If one were to become relevant or become no longer relevant, rather than having to create a new course, the provider could use the valid from and to dates to show when it applied. Next entity then is the course role entity. And where we have these role entities, what we're doing is saying that an organisation plays a particular role in that course. We have two purposes for this entity depending on the provider. For a provider is in England, we're looking at delivery organisation, so who's delivering learning in that course. And in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, we're interested in who's funding the course. So I've got a couple of examples just to show those two purposes. Firstly, for a provider in England, we're interested in who's delivering the course. So if you had a 4-year course, the first year would be delivered by provider A, the remaining 3 years delivered by provider B. You've got two providers delivering that course, so you would need two course role entities. The first would have the UK PRN of provider A, and that would have in the proportion field 25 because they're doing one of the 4 years, so 25% of the course. The second would have the UK PRN for provider B and 75 in the proportion, and both of them would have the role recorded as delivery organisation because that's what we're recording. So what that means is you know for every course up front and throughout that course that it's being delivered 25% by one organisation, 75% by another, rather than having that on a module by module basis, as is done at the moment. So that's for providers in England. A quick example then for providers in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. As I've said, what we're interested in here is who's funding the course, where's the money coming from. So an example where 50% is funded by tuition fees and the remainder is split equally between two other sources. The key with recording the funders here is that the tuition fee element is not taken into account. So we're just recording the funding that comes from another organisation rather than through tuition fees. So excluding tuition fees, we've got two sources of funding here, which again means we would have two course roles. The role type in both would be funder because we're recording funding. The proportions would both be 50%, again because we're excluding the tuition fee element, which means the remaining funding is 50-50 between these two bodies. And then the HESA ID would record the code for the relevant organisation. So that is CourseRole then. You've got the delivery organisations recorded for England and then funding for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Last couple of entities then. We have course reference. This is an optional entity. It's purely for providers' own use if they want to associate additional identifiers with a course. They can record their own course IDs. They could record UCAS course IDs. This one is, as I said, optional and for providers' own use to record that if it's useful to do so. And then finally, curriculum accreditation. So this is where we're recording whether a course is accredited by a professional, statutory or regulatory body that falls into one of the categories that we're interested in. So I mentioned earlier about those couple of concepts that we've taken out of the course aim field to create our qualification category field. And this is where those remaining couple have gone. So rather than within the qualification category saying that the qualification leads to eligibility to register with one of these bodies, we have the curriculum accreditation telling us that. So it tells us if it's accredited by the Architects Registration Board. It tells us if it has a relevant medical accreditation, so that could be from the GMC, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, a number of others that are listed. And then the final use is related to teacher training in Northern Ireland and Scotland. So it tells us whether the courses leads to registration with the General Teaching Council in Northern Ireland or Scotland, and whether that's at a primary or secondary teaching level. And we collect that information in a bit more detail in England and Wales, so it's held at the student level rather than against the course. Like with initiatives, accreditation does have valid from and to dates. We know that courses can gain and lose accreditation. So rather than having to create a new course, providers could use the valid from and to dates to indicate the period that accreditation is valid.
Ruth, can I just interrupt you again? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Another question for you. If we are trying to assign students to teaching provider, will we have to split FTE according to CRP proportion?
So FTE, this is about CourseRole and the delivery organisations. So FTE is recorded against the student course session. So it shouldn't be affected by the CourseRole. The CourseRole is saying what proportion of a course is split between different organisations. The FTE recorded against the student is about how much activity the student undertakes. And I don't think that that's reduced if the student is franchised for part of their time at another provider. I think that aligns with our current FTE guidance. If they're, say, doing a couple of modules elsewhere, their FTE still reflects their full time towards that engagement.
Thank you for that.
Let me know if I misunderstood that question. I think that's what you were asking.
Thank you.
Okay, and so that then is what we collect about a course. Final two bits of curriculum data then, we've got our session years. As I said, this records the planned dates for a year of a programme. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because I think it's much better illustrated by Rachel's scenarios that she's going to go through. A bit of an overview is that it just records start and end dates for a given year of a course. It's about the planned start and end dates rather than when a student actually engages and finishes. Because of that, it's not required for those fully flexible courses or postgraduate research courses, because if you're fully flexible, the idea of a planned start date doesn't apply. And I will let Rachel cover the rest when she goes through some of her examples. Final part then is modules. So again, I will just run through the data that we're collecting here. On the module entity itself, this is very similar to what we're collecting on a module in our current student return. Like with most of the other entities I've gone through, you need a unique identifier for that module defined by the reporting provider. We then also want to know how many credits that module is worth and what are the level of credits, as well as the relevant credit transfer scheme. Module also has an associated FTE and a module title. And then in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales, there's a requirement to record for the relevant modules whether they are taught in a Celtic language. One thing that has changed from the current return is that modules are not required for postgraduate research students. So providers do not need to, they can do so optionally, but they don't need to return modules for any PGR provision. Finally, then, I'll run through the sub-entities of the module. We've got a module cost center that's recording the cost centers associated with the modules with the relevant proportions. So again, if you've got more than one relevant cost center, we know the breakdown between different cost centers. We had a role at the course level saying which organizations had a role in the course. We've also got module delivery role at the module level, but here we're just interested in who are the delivery organizations. So we had delivery organizations for England on the course. This is where we have it for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. So for each module where the reporting provider doesn't fully deliver that module, providers in Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales need to tell us who it is that is delivering that module, again with appropriate proportions. Additionally, here we've got the franchise indicator field for providers in Wales to say whether it's a franchise partner or another collaborative arrangement. And finally, we have module subject. So as at the qualification level, we record the relevant HECOS codes against a module with proportions. This is optional for providers in England, as is the case from, I think it's from this year, 1920, in the current student return. So that is the data, all the different entities of curriculum data and the data items that we collect against them. You can see there again how it all fits together. I'm happy to take any questions before I hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Ruth. There's no questions at the moment, but if we just take a moment, if anyone has any questions, then they can either type them in or raise their hand. Okay, it doesn't seem that there are any questions at the moment. If anyone has any questions later on, we can always come back, or if you have any questions after the session, then please do feel free to drop me a message through the training inbox, training@hesa.ac.uk, and I can always pass them on to Ruth or Rachel.